Yes, please.
Nagamuthu sir, thank you very much for sparing time with me this evening and permitting me to have interaction with you, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Malkan. It is my pleasure to be with you and spend my time very usefully. If this time could be usefully spent with you, which would also be useful for the other younger generation of the lawyers, I'll be very, very happy. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, please. Yes.
Sir, how Nagamuthu sir as a child?
Yes.
How Nagamuthu sir was as a child?
Was?
As a child, as a child. How
Oh.
has he grown as a child?
Okay, it is very interesting. You see, I was born in a village. Both my parents were all illiterate, though my teacher was the only teacher in those days during pre-independence era. Both my parents were illiterates. So my family is an agricultural family. As it was a practice among the villagers, like any other boy in any other house, I was also involved in agricultural operations. I know everything in agriculture, including plowing. I was physically doing that. It is not mere supervising, I was doing that. Then unfortunately, I lost my father when I was doing my 7th standard. I was doing my schooling in the local panchayat school. I lost my father, unfortunately. And thereafter, it was my illiterate mother and my paternal grandmother, who herself was an illiterate woman, to bring me up, and my brothers and a sister also. So I studied there. But one thing, I was considered to be one of the best students in the school. I can claim so also. So after finishing my schooling, I joined a college and did my BSc chemistry in a nearby town. I used to go to the college by cycle every day, cycling around 15 kilometers from my village to the town to reach the college. And not only me, many boys like me used to only cycle as our transport to go to the college. Then in the year 1976, I successfully completed my BSc chemistry course, and I secured first class. You know that in those days, securing first class was not an easy thing. Out of 100 students in my class, only 5 could secure first class. I was one among them. I think that I was second in the college. In fact, I wanted to become a doctor. In those days, after finishing, there was a pre-university course. Now it is not that 12 plus 3, that pattern, 10 plus 2 pattern.
Yes.
It was 11th standard, then pre-university course. So after finishing my pre-university course, I attended the interview for the selection for admission into a medical college. In those days, selection was based only on interview. You know, in this political situation, how the interviews could have been conducted, it is very easily inferable. So I could not secure a seat. Then I finished my BSc. Again, I made an attempt. So there was 10% quota for fresh graduates. So under that quota, I applied, I attended the interview. I could not secure. Then the next option for me was to become a professor in a college. Therefore, I applied for MSc chemistry. There were only limited number of seats in those days in Tamil Nadu. I could not get a seat. So finally, I didn't have any course to study further. So lastly, I applied for B.Ed, Bachelor of Education course. It was a 1-year course which I joined in a government college. That college is also situated at a distance of around 10 kilometers from my village. I went there by cycle. I finished my B.Ed. Then I thought of becoming a school teacher, but I could not make that also. Therefore, as a last resort, having found nothing before me as an option, I made application to the government law college, Chennai. I got admission in the year 1977. Between 1977 to 1980, I did my law course in Madras Law College. Then in 1980, I finished the course. Then again with good marks. Then in 1981, January 7th, I enrolled myself as an advocate. After enrolling, the only option for me was to go to my village to practice because there was nobody else to help me to practice anywhere else, more particularly in Chennai in the High Court. Therefore, I went to my village. I went to a nearby town, that is our district headquarters. I tried to join the office of someone, but nobody was prepared to take me. I was just roaming around for about 15 days. Thereafter, one of my friends who was my senior in the law college, and through his senior, he persuaded one of the doyens of criminal bar in those days in my district headquarters, and he accepted me. Then I joined his office. That happened after nearly about 15-20 days of my just roaming around without any work. Then I joined. So that is how I became a lawyer. It was not out of my option. It was because I had no other option before me. Okay, please.
Sir, who was your senior? Who was your first senior that the lawyer of who was he?
So I should remember at this stage, at this moment, with all gratitude. My senior was one Mr. N. Karupsamy, who was a doyen of criminal bar in those days. And he never had appeared before any civil court. He did not file wakalat even in a single pro note case even. So out and out, he was a criminal lawyer. I was the only junior to him for some time. Then I learned civil law from another senior by name Mr. Vishwanathan, who is now 85 years old. He is still practicing. And so far as my criminal practice is concerned, I was shaped by one Mr. G. Vrudachalam Reddy. And he was from a nearby town. I used to go to him, and he only encouraged me a lot. He only inspired me a lot. So these three seniors, and yet another person by name Mr. G. Arungusamy, an advocate from a nearby town, and he gave me a lot of briefs when I started my independent practice. And I got to remember him also at this moment. He is still practicing. So these are the people who are all responsible mostly. And at the same time, I cannot say that only these people are my gurus. I took the entire bar, the senior members as my gurus. I learned things from every one senior. If from A senior I have learned one thing, from B senior I have learned another thing. Likewise, I learned. And there were about 120 lawyers in that district headquarters bar association. So I think that I was the 118th member in that bar. So everyone loved me. It was like a family. So that is how I practiced there. My senior used to send me to the second-class magistrate's court. Nowadays, you may not know you may not have experience with any second-class magistrate's court. In those days, we had a second-class magistrate court. It was a paradise for junior lawyers to learn. Then first-class magistrate. So my senior used to send me to second-class magistrate to do petty cases, small that summary procedure cases and summons cases and small cases I used to do. That is how I started learning as to how to cross-examine the witnesses, how relevant it is, and all that I learned there. Then after some time, I moved to the first-class magistrate court. Like that, I slowly picked up. So my fourth case, a case which I don't ever remember, is a murder case. After I became an advocate, within around 6 or 7 months, I think so, my senior had to be away on the day appointed for the examination of witnesses. In those days, the judges won't give any adjournment at any cost. If the trial date is fixed, all the prosecution witnesses will be present, and you can't ask for adjournment also. So therefore, 2 days before, my senior gave the brief to me and wanted me to take it to my home, read that and do the case. So it was on Friday evening he gave the same. I took it to my home. I studied it 2 days. I sat and I went to some other office, took out books, studied. I read every word of the charge sheet, 161 CRPC statements, etc. Then Monday morning, I started the case with all courage. like a senior, like a hero. So I still remember that day.
Right, sir.
It was one Mr. A.S. Kannan, a district judge, very eminent judge, and very pious man, very kind man. And before him, I did the case. Whenever I committed mistake, he corrected me and he guided me a lot. That is why I did the case. So on the trial went on for 2 days. So with my little experience, I finished the case. On the 4th day, the case was listed for arguments. That day, my senior had come. He was in the court.
Right.
But he had no intention to disturb me. But on seeing him, the judge told him, believing that he was there to argue. But my senior wanted me to prepare and argue the matter. But the judge mistook it. And on seeing the presence of my senior, he said, no, you allow him to argue. So he said that I already told him to argue. That is why I started arguing the case. I said something, I don't think that I would have made any sensible argument. That was tolerated by the judge and he appreciated me. And judgment came in 2-3 days. So in the judgment, the judge made an observation. He devoted few lines for me. And he said, my main argument was that it was not a case for acquittal, but it was a case for lesser punishment by convicting him under 304. So you please kindly remember 6 or 7 months of my practice. With that experience, I argued like this. So it's not a case of murder, exception 4 will come like that. I said something. The judge wrote in the judgment, I am unable to reject the argument advanced by the learned young lawyer, so and so, who has argued that the case would fall squarely within the exception number 4 of section 300, like that. So these words. So I am impressed by the argument of the learned young lawyer, so and so. That gave me courage. These words I cannot forget. That is how I started practicing. So at one stage, I was a much wanted lawyer, not only in my district, and slowly I extended my tentacles to the nearby districts. And at the end, almost I covered all the districts in the state of Tamil Nadu, except a few. I have conducted cases almost in all district headquarters and doing all sensational murder cases, mostly all sensational murder cases. I can say, I do not have the correct, exact data, but I think that I would have done around 1,200 to 1,500 cases. Yes, within my experience.
Trials?
Then, trials, I'm saying. I'm a trial say lawyer, basically. So then what happened, I used to come to Chennai to engage senior lawyers to brief them. So one of my friends whom I briefed wanted me to come to the High Court also to argue. That is why slowly I came to the Madras High Court, to the principal bench, and started arguing 1 or 2 matters, very rarely. And then once in 2 weeks, or at least once in a month, to do my murder case final hearings, I used to come to Chennai. That is how I learnt the art of arguing appeals in the High Court. To my luck, always a human being requires a little amount of luck, at least in his life. That happened in my life also. In 2004, the Madurai bench was constituted. So the struggle for establishment of a bench at Madurai started in 1965. To see my luck, in 2004, it got rectified in 2004. So I then shifted my practice to Madurai. I started practicing in the Madurai bench. And at one point of time, hardly within 2 years, I became, to some extent, I don't claim that I was a very prominent lawyer. I had picked up good practice. And in 2006, there was a thinking by the honorable judges to give one opportunity to a person from Madurai, because Madurai High Court, the bench had by then crossed 2 years of its existence. So they thought of, then the Honorable Chief Justice, see, I have to be very grateful, not only grateful, I should be very proud of him. Honorable Justice A.P. Shah, that I had no occasion even to meet him once. I never even believed that I would be called to for the purpose of elevation. I did not even think of that. And somehow he identified me. Then he wanted me to come here. It's a big story. I do not want to elaborate that. And finally, on the day when I came to Chennai to sign the papers, and the Chief Justice said, "Yes, I have seen you only once." I told him, "Yes, my lord. I addressed a meeting which was presided over by you." Oh, yes, that was 2 years before. Yes, it was the only meeting where the Honorable Chief had seen me, and that too he realized on the day when I signed the papers. So that is how I was elevated in 2007, March 22nd. I took oath office as an additional judge of the Madras High Court. Then I was made permanent. That is how my story had gone. I retired in the month of May 30th of 2017. Then I came to Delhi, even while in service, because of my passion for the legal profession as a lawyer, I decided not to seek any other assignment from any other government. Therefore, straight away on my retirement, so it happened like this. May 30th, I retired. So the vacation, I waited. July 3rd, court reopened. July 3rd morning, I was in the Supreme Court. So that time I was not a senior advocate. And somebody said that I should wait for my resignation as a senior advocate by the Honorable Supreme Court because it was almost a routine affair. I said that I can't wait for that. It is not the gown which will make the difference. It is a man who makes the difference. So saying, in fact, my former Chief Justice, Honorable Justice S.K. Kaul, also told me to wait. So I did not say no to him, but I started practicing from the day one. So I was designated as a senior advocate only in September 2018. Just see, after 1 year and 2 months, I was designated. By the time my probation period was over, that is how I would take it. So, after that, what is happening in the Supreme Court, you are with me always, and you see me, and I see you every day. Right. So that's why it goes. Yes, please.
Sir, how long have you done your juniorship, and after how much time have you started your independent practice?
My independent practice.
How you had been a junior, and after what time you started your independent practice?
No, see, I joined my senior's office in 1981. Then I started my independent practice in 1985 with the wishes of my senior. And even then, I did not stop going to my senior's office. I used to go there for taking books, to consult him and all that. But I started my practice in 1985. I got married in 1985. By that time, I was independent. I had my own office. So, yes.
Sir, what changes you would like to see in the legal education being
Yes.
which is being imparted these days, and what are your suggestions in the legal education that you are seeing nowadays?
Yes, I like this question very much, because when I was studying in the law college, and the legal education, I can say, was very, very poor. Today it is far, far better, because I interact with the today students who come to me as interns. I see their performance, I see their knowledge, and I also see the syllabus and all that. It is virtually a good change has happened in the legal education, which is appreciable. So I want to tell you that in those days when we were students, there was no class at all. So there were 50 students in my class, and the moment the professor or a lecturer, part-time lecturer who are lawyers from the courts, high court would come. The moment he enters, he will take attendance. 47 students will go out. We 3 will be sitting in the front row, only 3. So all the 3 have made something I can even call it as achievement, all the 3. So we 3 students used to sit there, and he will take class only for the 3. So the education was not, the legal education was not this much better. Now it is very good, in fact. And one more thing, what I would make by your suggestion is that the legal education should be more practical oriented. The students are sent to the courts as interns, the office of the lawyer, only hardly for 30 days. This is not enough. See, the concept of the Englishman, you just think of that. So far as Madras Law College in those days was concerned, in the morning, for the first year, there will be no class. It is a shifted system. Only in the afternoon, the second, first year students used to have classes. What I would do was that from my hostel, I would go along with the senior students in the bus to the college in the morning itself. Straight, I will go to the High Court. I will stand in the court halls. I will be seeing great lawyers arguing. In those days, and today's Attorney General, Mr. K.K. Venugopal was practicing here. Mr. Parasana was practicing here. Mr. P. Chidambaram was practicing here. So many doyens. So I used to go to the court every day in the morning, and till 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, I would follow some case, some sitting somewhere. And even the judges were also very courteous. They won't send me out because in those days we had no identity card, no identity card from the college. The college notebook, which will have that print of the name of the college. So that we used to carry morning. And similarly in the afternoon also we used to attend the court. I did not attend the office of any lawyer here in Chennai. So that was the minus point for me. But what I would suggest now is the legal education should be more practical oriented. Practical oriented. You conduct moot courts. You do not conduct any mock court in courts. It is not every student is going to practice on the appellate side in the High Court or in the Supreme Court. Many would go to the trial courts. So you should give them training as to how to frame questions in the chief examination, what is not a leading question and what is a leading question, how it should be put, and you should familiarize the student with the various provisions of the Evidence Act, more particularly from section 141 onwards up to 165. We should make them very familiarized with the art of cross-examination and being brief in their arguments, etc. So to that extent, I think that some thinking should go in the minds of the academics to change, to give some inputs like this. That's what is my suggestion. Please.
Sir, today in these present days, we see that bright students who actually do not have any background in law, they do not come in the litigation side. They do not come on litigation side and chose to go to the legal firms or corporate companies.
Yes.
Because of the struggle that we have, because of the struggle in the litigation that they need to face.
Yes.
Sir, what do you suggest to them to retain such bright students for the litigation, for the purpose?
Those students who opt to go to the corporate side are not from poor families.
Sir, I may tell you, I just made year one because there has been this issues I have been discussing. So today, legal education has become very costly. The colleges around, the fees that they pay in 5 years is not less than 50 lakhs.
Yes.
Not so. After they complete their 5 years, they would have spent around 50-60 lakhs at that point of time. So any student of any law college would have spent 50.
No, I got a slight different view on this.
Yes, sir.
See, maybe it is in Delhi or in any other cosmopolitan city. Even in Chennai, it is not there. And the per year fees here, even the topmost colleges are around 1.5 lakh only. Yeah. So you know about the Shastra University? I think that if my memory is correct, they charge around 2 lakhs per year. That is all. And it is not 50 lakhs. So 2 to 3 lakhs will be sufficient here in Tamil Nadu if you go to any college, whether it is government college, not to say. In government college fee is a few thousands. So per year, 2,000, 3,000, that's all.
So
But in private colleges, the fee is around 2 lakh. That is all.
so 2 lakhs, 2 or 3
Not
lakhs,
50 lakh.
2 or 3 lakhs. If you say I am 50 lakhs, it is in Delhi, sir. Jindal, it would not be less than 50 lakhs. It would be
Yeah.
more. I am on the minimum fees. 50 is the minimum that the colleges in Delhi pay. But even if we consider 2 or 3 lakhs, then they would have spent not less than 50 lakhs in 5 years. Now, after
Yes.
spending 15 lakhs, they have some zeal to recover that amount which they have spent from their parents' pocket. So instead of coming to or waiting for long time into the litigation, they would be opting for the corporate or law firms. So in order to, so the problem is that we loses the bright student so because of their zeal in recovering the amount that they have spent. For me, I may tell you, sir, for me, fees when I studied in 1998, 2003, the yearly fees was 5,000 in a private college, Symbiosis College where I have studied, which is which is 15 times more than what I have paid then. But for me, issues were for my time. Issues were different. Now the expenses they have incurred, their competition with their own friends who are earning, the competitions with lifestyles of their friends, these are the issues which present generation is facing. They have lifestyles, competition of lifestyle as well, competition of
This.
smartphone as well, competition of shoes as well, which I was not having that, but then they have to come to their expectations, and in that we loses that bright student who are actually zealous in law but will be absorbed by the corporate sector.
Brother, show me one field where the students, as soon as they come out of the college, do not face any competition. Show me one profession. You take, for example, the most attracted profession today is the medical profession. What is happening there? If they go to any private hospital, they are paid around 25,000 rupees per month. That is all. And they are also unemployed. The very same competition is there. If they go and put up any private clinic, it will not be an easy thing to get patients and to earn sufficiently. They are also struggling. Now you see what is happening in that engineering field. And this information technology, when it was showing growth, there was a great demand. And the moment one student comes out from a college, was employed for 1 lakh, 2 lakhs like that. Now what is the salary paid? 15,000 rupees, 10,000 rupees. And you see many engineering graduates. So I can cite one anecdote also. There was a news item very recently from Madras High Court that for appointment as a cook at the house of the honorable judges, there was and also for sanitary workers, applications were called for. Postgraduate students in engineering, graduates in engineering, postgraduates in other subjects, they all made application. So this competition is there in every field. So it is not very peculiar to our profession alone. So two things need to be done to turn these people towards the litigation side. Number one, so we should encourage them, we should tell them as to what the truth is. So we have to tell them repeatedly, and it is the duty of the professors who interact with the students every day, that initially for 10 years they have to struggle, only work. After 10 years, it is work as well as earning. After 20 years, it is earning and work. After 30 years, it is no work but only earning.
Right.
So this we have to encourage the student, number one. Number two, and the college level, the professors have to call the parents and inform them or convince them, persuade them not to bring upon any pressure upon a student to seek some employment like this. We should, first of all, we should persuade the parents first.
That is not
They
possible.
have to
That
yes.
is not possible, because on the basis of the placement that student will get, college will get ranking.
Okay. Whenever we have to take, we need a very strong bar. Unless we get the core students into this profession, so it will not be good for the institution. You are right. You are absolutely right. We have to take steps for that. You are absolutely right. I
College
fully
will
agree with
not
you.
do because they need to show their placements to get their ranking done. If they do not encourage students to get placements, then their placements would not be there and their ranking will go down.
Okay.
That college will
Correct,
not
correct.
do.
Correct. You are right. Yes, sir, please.
Sir, any specific matter which has been very interesting in your career, which has
Oh,
transformed your career completely?
oh, see, I will. One case which changed my mindset was that of a very poor man. I was sitting in my office. My office was in the first floor of the building. I was sitting in my office. One man, I could see him entering into my room, and he was accompanied by one of my juniors. And the charge sheet was given to me. I just went through that. So just a cursory glance. I went through that. I found that it was a very good case for acquittal. It was a very good case for acquittal. Really, it was a case based on circumstantial evidence. We can very easily demolish. And the man also said that he is innocent. To that extent, I was convinced. He openly said that he did not do anything. So we can assess from the words, from the facial expressions, etc., whether he is telling a lie or not. So the poor man, when I said that you tell me the truth, then I will defend. And repeatedly, he was just begging and telling that he was an innocent man. Already I said that I would defend you, don't worry. Then he went out of my room and along with my junior. So thereafter, I did not even hear about the case because I was at the impression that my junior will come and tell one or 2 weeks before the date of listing of the case. I totally forgot the case. And one day morning, I was just turning the local Tamil newspaper. I found there was a news item. And so and so had been given life sentence.
Oh.
I just went through that. Out of curiosity, I just went through that. From the facts, it struck my mind that facts were familiar to me. Then on reaching my office, I called my junior, said, did you see the paper today? Yes. He said, yes. He said, that case, and one man came here, facts are familiar to me. He said, yes, sir, that man, sir. What happened to him? So I told him that this was the fees. Then he said that he would come back. After some days, he came and he wanted, so I can't pay so much. So please give me the brief. He took it back. So my junior did not inform me. It was a grave mistake on his part. He did not inform me about this incident. He took back the bundle. So therefore, he did not come to my notice at all thereafter. Case and conviction. So it saddened me a lot. A poor man could not get legal. I am sure had I appeared in the case, I'm sure of getting acquittal. So it was nothing. So later I learned from the court that he appeared before the court and said that he had nothing means to engage a counsel. So free legal aid, you know what is the quality of free legal aid we give in this country. So the judge said, who is sitting here? Oh, you are a junior lawyer, all right. For how long you have been practicing? So 3-4 months. All right, you are appointed. So morning by 10:30, Raw Junior with no exposure was appointed. Then he was asked to do the case in the afternoon. He did the case. He did not even take any instruction from the client. He asked some nonsense questions. And the judge also was very happy to convict the person, although he was doing the greatest justice in the case. He convicted. I felt very sad. And after that, I gave very strong instruction to my juniors. If any person comes to our office, he should get legal aid from us. Because he is a poor man, because he is not able to pay money, fees, etc., you should not send him out. We will do it free of cost. That is how, out of every 10 cases which I did, 3 cases were free. So that is why I was doing that case. That case changed my mindset actually. That I was very extra careful. So that is the case which I can. Though I did so many sensational cases, though I did cases for rich people, so you can imagine hundreds and hundreds of cases I did. So many cases. But this case I still till today remember. What the man while in prison would have thought of me. This fellow, because I don't have money, they refused to appear for me, therefore I am in jail. That thinking would have been there in his mind. So this is, I think that it's not good for a legal profession. We should extend legal aid.
True.
That changed my mindset. Yes, which I cannot forget. Yes. Then as a judge, I got some curious cases. Can I say that?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir. This is your stage.
So I am now telling about a reported case.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have you, in your experience, have you ever heard of a case where a woman who was judicially declared as dead, as murdered, had appeared alive?
No, sir.
Have you ever heard of?
No.
So this thing happened in my court.
That's
I tell you.
Movie I have seen, but this is not. I have never heard of such thing.
Yes. I'll tell you as to what happened.
Yes, sir.
One young woman who got married a week before was found missing. Probably she was not happy with her husband. She went missing. Husband made a complaint. Police went in search of the woman, not to be seen anywhere. Finally, they found one dead body in a half-burnt condition beyond recognition. And nobody was able to identify because body was so badly mutilated. So what they did, they collected a photograph of the woman, and the skull was sent for superimposition. So we can't find fault with the policeman also. We sent it promptly for superimposition. The superimposition test, the scientific examination revealed that the person in the photograph and the skull tallied. Okay. Therefore, it was concluded that the woman was murdered. The dead body was that of that woman. Okay. And unfortunately, there was a fetus in the womb, either about some 8 to 9 weeks. Fetus was also there. That's one part. So now 4 accused were arrested. Some motive was attributed. They all made voluntary, only 4 accused gave voluntary confessions to the police that they took the woman because she demanded money and all that. Some transaction in respect of the sale of land.
164 as well, sir? 164?
No, unfortunately, no 164. 164. The confession to the police was there. And they confessed that we conspired on so and so date. We conspired to kill her. Then the first accused took her in a bus, saying that he would take her to a different village, collect money and give that. She went to be innocently with him. Then at one place, they took her into to a secluded place. They killed her. Then they poured the kerosene, set her on fire. Her anklet and other things were removed. They were in the custody of these accused. 27 recovery. The knife was recovered and these things were recovered. Only 4 were prosecuted now. Now, during trial, it's a case based on circumstantial evidence.
Correct.
There were also witnesses to say that the deceased was lastly seen in the company of these accused.
Correct.
Some witnesses were put. Fortunately, they all turned hostile. So the court acquitted, but court gave a specific finding. Yes, it was a murder because there were stab injuries and all that. She was killed by somebody. It is certainly a homicide. Right. It is also a murder. But unfortunately, the court lamented. Unfortunately, the prosecution is not able to establish the case against these accused. Therefore, I am acquitting. So only 4 accused are now acquitted. Fortunately, the occurrence took place in 2002. The charges were 120B, 302, and 201. So they were all acquitted in the year 2000. Somewhere I forgotten that. Somewhere acquitted. So after acquitted, I think that it was in 2009 they were acquitted. In 2011, a woman appeared in the village with the 2 children. And you know, 2002, 2009 years after, she returned to the village, 2 children, and people could identify her. So she is alive. So now she has to take the properties of her parents. How a dead woman can claim properties?
Right.
Judicially, there is a pronouncement she is no more.
Correct.
So she went to the district collector. She gave a petition to the district collector. Say, I am very much alive, but the judgment says that I am dead. I cannot claim my properties. I cannot ask for transfer of mutation of patta and all that in my name, revenue records, etc. Therefore, please kindly correct it. the district collector, he forwarded the same to the superintendent of police. So superintendent of police forwarded that to the deputy superintendent of police, then to the inspector. Then it went to the hands of the head constable at the end.
Right.
So the head constable, he went through the judgment. He told her, you see, may be true that you are alive, but what to do? The judgment says that you are dead. We cannot do anything because the judgment from the court, you go and work out your remedies in the court. So she went away. She could not do anything. She was a poor, illiterate woman. She went away, and thereafter she was not seen anywhere. This incident happened. She was staying in the village for about a week's time. Then she went back. Thereafter she was not seen. These 4 accused who were acquitted, they filed a petition in 2011. They said, you prosecuted me as though we are all murderers. Though we have been acquitted, that stigma will never disappear. So we are carrying that stigma. The woman is very much alive. Pay as compensation. This petition, this petition was filed in 2011. Okay. For 4 years, the petition could not be disposed of.
Right.
Because I do not want to blame anybody, and somebody who was at it had some confusion as to how to go about it.
Right.
In 2015, I went there. It happened in Madurai bench where I originally practiced. So in 2015, that lawyer made a mention to me. So there is a matter like this, and it's an urgent matter. This can be taken up. So I said that already you listed. Next day it was listed. I went through the papers and etc. Then I called the superintendent of police. You go and bring the one. I called the records from the collectorate. Collectorate people said yes, she came, she gave petition, we forwarded. Then police, they also said yes, we received a petition, we give this kind of disposal. We gave. All right, okay. Then I called the superintendent of police. I warned him. I directed him to go and fetch the woman wherever she is. So I gave him 1 week time. Within 1 week, they produced her now before me. I asked so many questions, and she correctly answered father's name, mother's name, where studied, etc. Everything. Her husband was there. Her husband, he lived with her only for 4 or 5 days, and he was also not able to identify her correctly. Assuming that he identifies her, and for that matter, we cannot accept that identification, send her with him. That problem is there. No, now what to do? It's only 482 petition. Then I said that I directed the superintendent of police to find whether any relative with whom this DNA could be done. You find out. He went there. He found her biological father, original father. What happened to her mother when she was hardly 3 months old? Deserted her husband, eloped with somebody, and this girl was all along under the impression that the stepfather was the biological father.
Right.
But it's not true. So police, somewhat, the other superintendent, very fine man, very young officer, he brought that biological father. I asked the father, you just see this woman, who is she? I do not know, sir. And when my child was hardly 3 months old, that woman eloped. Thereafter, I got no one. I have not seen them, so I cannot identify. Then I sent for DNA. Fortunately, within 1 year, I got the DNA result, which said that she is the daughter of so-and-so. That man was proved to be the biological father of this girl, this woman. No identity established. Now, how to set aside the judgment? That judgment is based on evidence.
Correct.
I am not conducting any trial. What is before me, what were before me were all only statements recorded from the persons. The husband gives a statement, he gives a statement, and the expert opinion. Nothing is evidence. No, I cannot rely on them. What is my jurisdiction of 482 to treat the same as evidence, and what to do about that judicial declaration? No appeal, no revision was pending before me. So then I explored the possibility. You know, 482 says nothing in this court shall deem to affect the inherent jurisdiction of this court. You know, inherent jurisdiction on the High Court is not conferred by 482. It only saves the inherent jurisdiction. Nothing in the court shall prevent the court from doing justice.
Correct.
Okay. To do to meet the ends of justice.
To
Meet
meet
the ends of justice. That is a clause, last clause. So citing that and after citing so many judgments of the Supreme Court, I extended my 482 jurisdiction and I conducted trial in the High Court. I examined around 10 witnesses in the High Court. The husband, so and so, many people I examined. On the cross-examination, I examined them as court witnesses now. I allowed the prosecutor to cross-examine. The additional advocate general appeared and he cross-examined some witnesses. That counsel for the original accused, he also cross-examined. And finally, I gave judgment under 482. In excess of my power under 482, I set aside that judgment of acquittal. Now, by this judgment, I discharged those 4 accused. Okay, 1. 2. And whose dead body was there? Some dead body was found, no? I issued a direction to reopen the case, to do investigation, okay, to find out the identity of that woman and to go ahead with the further investigation.
Right.
So far as this woman is concerned, now I declare, I set aside that judgment that she is no more. Now I declare so and so is very much alive.
Right.
So that is how a woman who was bodily and solely living had to run from pillar to post to prove what? See, I am alive. I am alive. Please accept. Please agree with me. So with that, she was running from pillar to post. A very interesting case. I think that I have not come across any judgment from any other Honorable High Court or the Supreme Court. That is the only case where, so there are cases where the so-called deceased had appeared before the judgment. There are instances. But after a judicial pronouncement that a woman is no more, the deceased appeared. So this is the only case in the country. And I think that this is the only case where 482 jurisdiction was extended to do trial by the High Court and set aside the judgment of the trial. That's a very rare case. So this is also a reported case. Koil Pillai is a reported case.
Right.
Then can I move on to another case?
Do you have citations for our record, sir?
It was in, you go to Google,
right, sir,
and say Koil Pillai, Koilpillai, Koil, Koil Pillai, Pillai.
Right, that is sufficient for us.
You go to Google.
No, we'll get it. Okay. We'll get it from the name, sir. We'll do that.
So what do you say about this case? What is your view?
Sir, I just only have one doubt, sir. I mean, I don't know whether it would be any, how would we have any relevance or not, because acquittal appeal or a conviction appeal, whatever it could be, it goes before the division bench concerned in our High Court of Gujarat. So it goes before the division bench. So whether in 482 single judge exercising power of 482 could take away the power of appeal, which is to be exercised by the division bench. At the most, 482 jurisdiction single judge may, I'm not sure, because that there has to be division bench to at least set aside or confirm the order of acquittal or conviction of the.
No, as per our court, appellate side rules, these matters are dealt with only by a single judge.
Even the acquittal appeal goes before the acquittal appeal 302 goes before the single judge. Oh, so that way, but that's the only doubt I was having, because in Gujarat we have appeal goes even if
even otherwise. See, what is wrong in exercising the jurisdiction of 482?
No, nothing is wrong. No, nothing.
Yeah, see, this is not a regular appeal. Which jurisdiction falls within the jurisdiction of the division bench? Assuming for a moment that a division bench alone is competent. Okay. So what is wrong? This is not a regular appeal which is to be heard by a division bench. This is not a revision to be heard either by a division bench or by a single judge as per the rules. This is a peculiar situation. So I have 482 jurisdiction. So this petition was filed under 482. I heard the jurisdiction, I exercised.
No, true. But then while setting aside, we'll discuss it, sir, in person when we are together. Okay. Because
okay, please kindly read the judgment, then tell me.
Yeah, very well, sir. Sir, you have a few other cases to share with us, sir. You have a few other cases.
Yes, a few more cases also I can say.
Yes, sir.
See, in another case, as a judge, I decided this case. 6 people were killed by setting fire to their house when they were all sleeping during night. Okay. Early morning, people found that the entire house was torched and all the 6 died. Okay. There were no eyewitnesses. There was a pressure upon the police. Now, in that case, the police, as usual, picked up people and voluntary confessions were there, recoveries were there. Now, 9 people, I think, 9 people were prosecuted, charge sheeted. Okay, they were all arrested. They were in jail for full term. After 90 days, they came out on bail under Section 167, and 9 were prosecuted. Among 9 or 7, I'm not very sure of that.
Right.
All right, it's not a matter.
Correct.
So one of the accused among them filed a petition for discharge. Okay. So he said his argument was only in one line. He said, there is no material against me. There is only one thing against me, that is a confession which I am said to have made to the police, which is not admissible. If we exclude that, there is nothing against me. That was the argument. The session judge, fortunately or unfortunately for these people, dismissed the petition stating that these are all the matters which are to be gone into at the time of trial. So for the session judge to hold that this confession is nothing and it is not admissible and the trial is to take place, that was a view taken by him. It was challenged before me. Okay, so it came up. So only one man was there. I ordered notice, then police appeared and they said, what is the case? What are the materials against him? The counsel for the accused said, yes, only the confession, nothing else. Then I called for the records from the trial court. I went through that. I found that there are not counsel for the defense was right. There is no evidence at all whatsoever, even remotely implicating the accused, except the confession made to the police. And these recoveries are all some immaterial recoveries, nothing else. Then, and even that recoveries were not from all, from 1 or 2 people. Then I found to my shock that there was no evidence against anybody, no evidence at all. Had I allowed the trial to go on, all the people would have been acquitted by the trial court in no minute, because there was nothing against them. Then again, I had to call the superintendent of police to my court. I asked him, how did you supervise and how this charge sheet was approved? And I asked so many queries. Then the superintendent of police said that he himself would do the investigation now. When I stayed the proceedings, I reopened the case, allowed him to do further investigation. So I gave him 2 months time. So after 2 months, he came up with a report. It was in a cover. It was given to me. I just wanted a copy to be furnished to the other side. Then I went to it. It's not a sealed cover procedure. It's an ordinary procedure. I opened it. It was running to pages. I just opened it. I was under the initial impression that the superintendent of police would have collected a lot of material against these accused. That was the initial impression I had. With that impression, I read. At the end, I found that this was the request of the superintendent of police in conclusion in his report. See, out of these accused, 5 have been falsely implicated by my inspector. They are innocent people. There is no evidence. They are all poor people. They were sleeping under a tree after finishing their agriculture coolie work that day. And this man, because there was heavy pressure upon him, because 6 murders. So corresponding pressure was there upon the inspector. Therefore, he has arrayed these people falsely as accused. Request was, please discharge them. This was the request. But one thing, see, the man who was before me, the one person, against whom he collected a lot of materials. No. So I had to dismiss the petition.
Correct.
What will happen to the other 5 people? So exercising my suo motu power under 482, I quashed the case and against these 5 accused.
That is right.
Would it be doing justice if I simply stop discharging them?
Correct.
No. Therefore, I said while discharging, the government should come forward to pay compensation to them.
Right.
They were in jail for 93 days. They were in jail.
Hmm.
They were in jail for 93 days.
Hmm.
So I asked them to pay compensation. You know, what are the pleas taken?
Hmm.
On sovereign immunity.
Hmm.
These people are not before you. Then why do you bother? Let them go to civil court, make a claim.
Hmm.
Like that, so many pleas were taken. At the end, I wrote like this.
Hmm.
And for 70 years, we have been waiting for the poor people to come and knock at the doors seeking justice. But they are not able to come because of poverty, illiteracy, and so on. So day has come. We cannot afford to wait anymore for the poor people to come to the court. Let the court carry justice in golden plates. Go to the hut of the poor man, deliver it there. That is the real justice that we have to do now. Writing all these things, I directed the government to pay 2 lakhs each. Very paltry sum, 93 days in jail, 2 lakhs. So the government, they didn't want the poor man to be compensated. They took up the matter to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court issued a notice. Finally, what Supreme Court did, Supreme Court reduced the compensation and said 10,000 rupees per head. This was the final order made by the Supreme Court. This case also disturbs me a lot. Disturbed me. This this is also a reported case, and there are many more cases. I can say. Can I say about only one more case?
Yes, sir. You go ahead, sir. It is your stage.
Okay. Only one more case, because otherwise I will be going on saying about the case.
Please, sir, go ahead, sir. No way. Please go ahead, sir.
Only one case.
Please go ahead.
So that was a case of cheating and 420 APC. The case was pending before the magistrate. There were 4 accused. One accused by name Satya was absconding. Okay, he was absconding. The court issued a warrant. The police people picked up someone and said that he is that Satya. He was already in prison in connection with some other case. He was on remand. They got PT warrant and produced him before the court and said that he is that man, before the accused. He pleaded to the magistrate, no, I am not that man. I did not commit that crime. He pleaded. He tried to establish his identity. But the magistrate did not agree with him. He put him up for trial and convicted him also. Then he went on appeal. And before the appellate court, though it was a legal aid case, one lawyer took up so much of strains and proved before the sessions court by additional evidence under 391 that the real accused is elsewhere, he is still alive. Okay. Then the session judge now acquitted this man and ordered for some amount to be paid as compensation and the same to be recovered from the inspector of police. Then they took up the matter to the High Court. They got it paid. So finally it came up before me.
Right.
So I was fully convinced, and the police also, now I got a report from the Superintendent of Police that the real accused is very much available in the village. He is available in the village. So they admit now that he has been falsely implicated. He is not the man. Then I wanted the man to be produced. He was still in jail. He was still in jail. By the time he had completed more than 6 years of imprisonment. 6 years. He was produced. Then he said that I am not so and so, and we also had materials. And he told me that while in jail, and I do not know to what extent his statement is true or not, because I had no occasion to examine that. The statement made by him to me, I just want to tell you. He told the court that while in prison, to come out of this case, the police people injected the blood of a man who was suffering from the AIDS. So this man also had AIDS now. So he said that, sir, I got AIDS. So I issued a direction to police to investigate that allegation further. But I set aside the judgment of the High Court, Appellate Court, and discharged him. The Appellate Court acquitted him. I discharged him now, modifying the judgment. I said that he is not the accused, the real accused is elsewhere. Then for 6 years imprisonment, I said, as a poor agriculturist, you would earn 100 rupees at least a day. For 6 years, you would earn at least from around 10 lakhs.
Hmm.
Therefore, I said, you pay. I directed the government to pay 10 lakhs as compensation.
Hmm.
Therefore, I said, you pay immediately in 2 days
Hmm.
some amount so that he can go for treatment.
Hmm.
So they paid some 2 lakhs. They paid from the fund which was available with the Superintendent of Police.
Hmm.
Then the rest of the amount I gave around 20, because the file is to be moved, in the official hierarchy, how it works. I gave some 15-20 days.
Hmm.
So after 15-20 days, when the case was called, the draft in his name was produced before me, but the man was not alive. He died. This is the legal system. This is the justice that we are doing. When had the magistrate been somewhat vigilant, this problem would not have arisen. He was crying like anything before the magistrate, saying that I am not so and so, I am not so and so. He did not hear that. He punished him. 6 years in prison. Just imagine. He died. He died. Yes. And he told one more story. His wife deserted him because of this. So these are third case. These cases and criminal, there are many more cases like this. They are all curious cases which I dealt with. I do not want to add many more cases. So one more thing I would say.
Yes, sir.
You may ask me about the disposal that we made in
Yes.
the High Court.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Even today, if you go by the statistics of the cases pending before various High Courts,
Yes.
which has been now published in the report of the Honorable Supreme Court, you will find it in the Honorable Supreme Court website.
Yes, sir.
In the country, Madras High Court stands first in a matter of disposal.
Yes, sir.
See, what happened when I was during my end of my survey, for 2 years, I was given this portfolio to take up all division bench matters like murder case appeals, etc. 2 years. So some months in Madurai bench, sometime here in Chennai. I was a senior judge, and previously as a junior judge also, with a senior I was dealing with that. As a senior judge, and there were a number of junior judges. I used to dispose of, I don't say that we used to dispose of minimum 8 cases a day.
8
After finishing all the miscellaneous work. Minimum 8 cases, I tell you. Maximum on one day, we disposed of 14 cases. We did not, see, touching my conscience, I tell you, we did not cause any injustice to anybody. I am sure of that. So this you will understand if I say one anecdote. When I was sitting in Madurai bench lastly, I was administrative judge. Administrative judge means the senior most judge in the administration. I was administrative judge. It was the convention that as and when the chief justice comes there to have sitting with the senior judge. So in the first bench, the senior most judge will sit with the chief justice. So as per the practice, I sat with the chief justice. The chief justice, Honorable Justice Kaur, Sanjay Kishan Kaur, the Honorable Judge of the Supreme Court. And the first day, we had in the list all writ appeals, civil matters, and motor action claim cases, divorce cases like that. And Honorable Justice Kaul will not feel tired at all. From 10:30 to 4:45, he would sit at a stitch, except for the lunch break. We will dispose of. So we disposed of all civil matters the first day. In the evening, I told him, so we can also list some criminal matters and dispose of. His Lordship said that the depositions are in Tamil, how to dispose of. I told him, believe my ability to translate very correctly, and you please believe in that. Trust me. I will do translation. And the lawyers will translate simultaneously and argue the case. I told him. Already that is the case, we will list. I directed the registry to list 8 cases. So 8 cases were listed. So no, morning, writ matter, this matter, that, civil, etc. were all taken up. So it was 4 o'clock in the evening. Only 45 minutes left. The Chief Justice turned towards me. So indicating to me what to do. I said, we will try. We will make an attempt. We will open. What's the problem? All right. We took up. Believe us, it is a matter of record. Out of 8 cases, we disposed of 7 cases in 45 minutes. this Honorable Justice, my Chief Justice, Honorable Justice Kaul, told in the Supreme Court once in open court when I was arguing some case. Yes. So this happened. So at the end of the day, you are so much surprised to see the way in which the lawyers argued the matter. So he gave a small speech from the dais. He named this method as Madurai model. Madurai model of argument, Madurai model of disposal. So they will give, in 2 pages, they will give a small gist. So these are all the eyewitnesses, 1, 2, 3 eyewitnesses, these, like that. They will say, this is a point, this is a point, this is a point. As against PW1, and he has turned hostile. PW2, and he did not disclose the occurrence for 15 days. PW3, this, that. No explanation, no explanation. Then decide public prosecutor. What do you say? PW2 did not disclose the occurrence for 15 days. What is your explanation? No explanation. Where is the evidence? We will just return. No explanation. Any other evidence? No other evidence. Public prosecutor is not a case for acquittal? Yes, acquittal. Yes, acquittal. Yes. We will dictate the operative portion. Right. In the evening, in the chamber, we would sit and give detailed judgment.
Right.
That is how.
That is also quite easy to be on the basis of chart prepared. Yes.
Yes, yes. When I demitted my office, in the principal bench, so far division bench appeals are concerned, we had around 40 cases, just 40 cases, all filed in the months of March and April. Because April end was the last working day for the year, then in May I retired.
Right.
So cases filed in those 2 months could not be disposed of. Up to February, we cleared all the cases. Similarly, in Madurai bench, I think that we left around 50 cases. So total pendency when I demitted my office was only 90 cases in both the benches putting together. So what is the message which I want to tell you out of this is,
yes, sir,
not to boost myself or anybody else.
Yes.
But for the fullest cooperation with bar, do you believe that this would have been achieved? Certainly not. So we have a tradition here that lawyers will not unnecessarily argue for hours together. They will argue only to the point, few minutes. I tell you one more small illustration. There is a case encounter.
Yes, sir.
Case encounter. The accused sustained all vital parts, serious injuries. Okay. No explanation. No investigation of the counter case. This is the argument. What else do you require in the case? What else do you require? Then we will take the evidence. We will see, yes, what are the injuries, vital part, serious injuries. What is the origin? It will take hardly 15 minutes or 20 minutes to decide the case. Then we will say yes, acquittal, conviction. So the lawyers are responsible.
Right.
So by citing this, the message which I want to tell out of my experience is,
yes, sir,
that your practice should be cultivated among the lawyers, not to make lengthy arguments, unnecessary arguments. In the Supreme Court, you and me have been witnessing,
yes, sir,
during final hearing matters, endlessly arguments are advanced, endlessly. So I would say that as it is done in some Western countries, there should be time limit fixed. So this case, it should be planned out. I will give you 1 hour. No, 1 hour may not be sufficient for me. All right, 1.5 hours. All right. Thereafter, no more time. Like that, time is to be fixed. The lawyer should come up with a brief notes. It should be given to the judge. These are all the points. There is the matter. We have to minimize the time duration for arguments, and the lawyers should cultivate the habit of only pointing out the material facts and not every fact. So reading the FIR, reading the evidence of every witness, including the hostile witness, unnecessarily it consumes the time.
Right.
So that is that. You know what is the pendency in the Supreme Court? Now the data shows around 50,000 cases are pending. When are we going to dispose of those cases?
True.
If we are not going to limit the time taken by the lawyers in the matter of argument, this should be cultivated. That is what I want to say by citing our Madurai model. Yes.
I hope every High Court and Supreme Court adopts that model, sir.
Yes. I can even get the synopsis which are prepared in Madurai bench as well as in Madras bench, the principal bench by the lawyers.
Hmm.
Okay. Yes, sir, please.
Sir, what is the procedure or process that you undertake to prepare a matter now that you are required to argue before the Supreme Court?
Oh, yes, sir. Now I have taken different shape after my retirement.
That's what therefore I framed that way.
Yes, 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 yes. In the Supreme Court, to be frank, I do not satisfy myself with the briefing by the injecting counsel, by the briefing counsel. See, I don't satisfy myself.
Right, sir.
It is one way of looking at it.
Right.
Counsel comes, it is his case, he injects, these are all the points raised by him. All right, I will, as a speaker, I will go and tell the same points. This is one way of doing, but I don't do that. You know that you have briefed in some of the matters.
Yes, sir.
I will have extensive discussion with the lawyer. And before I give time for conference, I want the brief to come to my office first,
right.
At least 1 or 2 days before. I sit and study the paper thoroughly from point 1 to point last. I read the entire paper.
True.
Then when the briefing counsel comes, for some time I keep silent because he may have some new point other than a point which I have found out.
Right.
Therefore, I allow him to brief fully and I patiently hear him. After that, I start discussing the matter. I tell him that these are only points which I have found, and he may have his own reservation about my points, and he may ask me to modify. Or at times, the points which he has found out may be the better points which are to be projected first. So that is the way in which I prepare the cases to go to the court. So unless we have meticulous preparation, I don't think that we can succeed in the Supreme Court. And hardly we are given few minutes time in SLPs in the matter of the time of admission.
Right.
We have to be very, very thorough. Yes. Yes, please.
So what are your other hobbies?
Which one?
Hobbies, your hobbies, sir. Other hobbies.
No, your voice is not very audible.
I'm sorry.
Hobbies.
Hobbies, sir.
Oh, hobbies. Okay. My hobby is teaching law.
Right.
So that gives me a lot of happiness. I got passion for that. As and when I find time, I call my juniors, I teach them. And if anybody wants to speak to me over phone, even as a judge, my cell phone number was available even with a magistrate. If he has got any doubt on legal issues, they were at liberty to call me anytime to discuss with me. If they find any new case, they can discuss with me. That freedom I had given. So same thing I give to my juniors now. I do that. Now, during this Corona lockdown, I do the same. So far, I have conducted 18 classes for the young lawyers. And not two have been uploaded in the YouTube also.
Right.
Other things are, see, I have selected some 40 young lawyers who are all very fast upcoming lawyers as a group. They call me every day by 11 o'clock. Every day, alternately, today civil, tomorrow criminal, like that. I give lecture to them on very important topics and which are very useful for them. Right. That is how I spend my time now. And I don't have any other hobby. And the other hobby is only to read. That is all. Right. No cinema, no drama, no dance program, no drinking, nothing. Okay, please.
Sir, last question, sir. What changes do you expect to see in legal fraternity post-lockdown after we all have a chance of self-introspect?
See, I am hopeful that we will rejuvenate ourselves and we will go and appear before the court with more vigor. That is what I expect from the lawyers, legal fraternity. But it's in the hands of God Almighty when we are going to be allowed to come to the court to argue. As we do in open court, in the presence of many lawyers, seeing the judges face to face, we can't do through the video conference. That is what I feel. Even this interview, if we see face to face, and that would give more happiness, more freedom for us to speak.
Right.
And we are not used to this kind of practice,
Right.
seeing their face on the screen and speaking.
Right.
So this difficulty our legal fraternity may have if these arguments are going to be advanced through video conference.
Right.
Yes.
Sir, any career advice qua me specific, sir?
For you, you are a very seasoned lawyer. I have seen you arguing many cases in the Supreme Court. You don't need any advice from me. You don't need any suggestion from me. You know how to conduct yourself in courts. You have got very rich experience. But one thing is very sure, and you and people like you are going to be the pillars of this institution. And I am hopeful on seeing people like you, who are all very brilliant and very sincere. I am very hopeful that the institution will survive. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving.
Thank you for interaction, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have taken so much of time.
No, sir, it was pleasure having you, sir. It was pleasure having you.
Thank you.